My mother sold my apartment by forging my signature to pay for my half-brother's college, but when I sued her, she got 3 years in prison, and I destroyed her marriage with a secret I kept for 10 years. I'm 29 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I need to tell this story because what my mother did to me basically destroyed any idea I had about what family means. I guess I should start at the beginning, when my parents got divorced. I was 8 years old, and even though at that time I didn't understand much of what was happening, I remember perfectly the day my dad, Thomas, packed his things and left. My mom, Nancy, sat me down on the couch and told me something like, "Your dad and I aren't going to live together anymore, but we both love you very much." You know, the typical speech all divorced parents give. I stayed with her because that's generally how things work. And for a while, everything seemed relatively normal. I mean, as normal as it can be growing up with a single parent. But things changed when my mom met Kevin. I was like 10 or 11 years old. Kevin was a contractor. He's like 53 years old now. That I think about it. But back then, he was younger, obviously. And he seemed like a decent guy, honestly. He was nice to me, tried to be friendly, and for a while I thought maybe things were going to get better. Then Matthew was born, my half-brother. And that's when everything really changed. It wasn't something immediate, but little by little, I started to feel like I was invisible in my own house. Everything revolved around Matthew, which I guess is normal when you have a baby, but it never stopped being that way. You know what I mean? Everything Matthew needed, everything he wanted, every school activity, every small achievement, it was like I didn't exist. My mom became this super dedicated version of a mother, but only with Matthew, not with me. Years went by, and the feeling of being a stranger in my own house kept getting stronger and stronger. I tried to talk to my mom about how I felt, but she always had an excuse, like "I'm busy now, Victoria," or "we'll talk later," or she just straight up ignored me. My dad would come pick me up on weekends, and I would count the days until I could get out of that house. With him, it was different. He listened to me. He asked me how school was going, what I wanted to do with my life, all those things parents are supposed to do. But I only saw him 2 days a week, so the rest of the time I was trapped in this house where I was basically a ghost. Then came the cheating thing. I was 17, almost 18, and I came home early one day because classes had been canceled for some reason I don't even remember anymore. I came in through the front door and heard voices upstairs, and one of those voices was definitely not Kevin's. I went up the stairs because, I don't know, I guess part of me already knew what I was going to find, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. My mom's bedroom door was slightly open, and there she was, with some guy I'd never seen before. I'm not going to go into details because it's disgusting and because honestly it still makes me nauseous thinking about it. But what I do remember is that I stood there in the hallway, unable to move, feeling like my entire body had frozen. My mom saw me, and you know what she did? She went hysterical, started screaming at me about how I dared to just come in like that without warning, that it was her house and her private life, and that if I told Kevin anything, I was going to regret it. The guy got dressed super fast and ran out without even looking at me, and I was left there with my mom yelling at me as if I was the one who had done something wrong. I told her, "Seriously? You're going to blame me for this?" And she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "You don't understand anything, Victoria. You're a selfish child who only thinks about herself. Kevin and I have problems, and this isn't your business." The thing is that in that moment, something broke inside me, like completely. All the indifference, all the neglect, all the feeling invisible. And now this. It was too much. I called my dad that same night and told him everything. Well, not everything. I didn't tell him about the cheating because at that moment I felt like it wasn't my place to say it. But I told him I couldn't keep living with my mom, that I needed to get out of there. My dad didn't ask me many questions. He just said, "Come live with me." And so I did. I packed my things that same week. My mom didn't even try to stop me. In fact, she seemed relieved that I was leaving, and I moved in with my dad. It was weird at first because I was basically starting from zero. New school for senior year, new friends, new routine, but it was 1,000 times better than being in that house pretending everything was fine. Living with my dad was probably the best year of my life up to that point. He worked a lot, had his own business or something like that, but he always made time for me. We had dinner together almost every night. We talked about everything, about my plans for college, about what I wanted to study, about life in general. And then, like 6 months after I moved in with him, he gave me the keys to an apartment. He told me, "This is for you, Victoria, for when you go to college, or so you can rent it out and have an income, or for whatever you want." It was a small apartment, but in a decent area. It already had a tenant who paid rent every month, and I couldn't believe it. I asked him, "Really? It's mine?" And he said, "It's yours. I want you to have something that's completely yours. Something nobody can take away from you." There was a kind of complicated technical detail. My dad explained to me that because of custody laws and because I was a minor, my mom's name had to be on some papers, but that legally the apartment was mine and that when I turned 18, everything would be completely in my name. I asked him if that was safe, and he told me yes, that he had already consulted with a lawyer and everything was in order. I trusted him because my dad had never lied to me, and I signed all the papers he gave me. The apartment became my lifeline, like the idea of having something of my own, something that represented my future, kept me motivated when things got difficult. And then my dad got sick. It was fast, too fast. One day he was fine, and the next they diagnosed him with cancer, and in 6 months, he was already gone. He was 58 years old when he died, and I was just turned 18. The funeral was shit. My mom showed up with Kevin and Matthew, acted like the heartbroken widow when they'd been divorced for like 10 years, and I didn't have the energy to deal with her theatrics. I was devastated. My dad was literally the only person who had made me feel important, loved, seen, and now he was gone. After the funeral, I found out that everything my dad had, he'd left to me, including the apartment that was now completely in my name without any legal complications. It was the only good thing in the middle of all that shit. Years went by without me talking to my mom. Like, no contact, zero. I started college, graduated, got a job at a marketing agency, and basically built my life without her in the equation. The apartment my dad gave me was still being rented. I used that money to pay for my things. And everything was going relatively well. Until one day, like 5 years after my dad's death, my mom called me. I was surprised to see her name on my phone, honestly, but I answered because, I don't know. I guess a part of me still wanted to believe that maybe she had changed or something. The conversation started normal. She asked me how I was doing, what I was up to, all that superficial chat you have with someone you don't really know. And then she got to the real point of the call. She told me, "Victoria, I need to ask you a favor. Matthew is going to start college next year, and the truth is Kevin and I are short on money. Could you lend us something?" I don't know why, but my first reaction was to say yes, like automatically. I told her, "How much do you need?" And she said an amount that I honestly don't remember exactly, but it was quite a bit, like several $1,000s. I told her I would think about it and let her know, and I hung up feeling weird, like something didn't add up, but without being able to identify exactly what, I decided not to give her the money. Not because I didn't have it, but because something told me that if I started giving her money, it was never going to stop, and besides, why should I? She was never there for me, never supported me, made me feel invisible for years, and now she appeared because she needed something. I sent her a message telling her I couldn't help her, that I was sorry but I had my own expenses and plans. I thought that was going to be the end of it, that she was going to get angry and disappear again, and I was fine with that. But what happened next was much worse than anything I could have imagined. Like 3 months after that conversation, I got a call from the tenant of my apartment. The guy was super upset. He told me, "Victoria, I need to talk to you urgently. I just received an eviction notice and I don't understand what's going on. I've always paid the rent on time." I was confused because obviously I hadn't started any eviction, so I told him, "Give me a second, let me investigate what's happening." I called the building manager and they told me something that basically left me in shock. They told me, "The apartment was sold 2 months ago. The new owner wants the tenant to leave." I told them, "What do you mean it was sold? I'm the owner. Nobody sold anything." And the manager told me, "We have here all the papers signed by you and everything is legally in order." It took me like a whole week and a lawyer to discover what had happened. Turns out my mom had forged my signature on all the sale documents for the apartment. She used the fact that her name still appeared on some old papers from the time when I was a minor, and basically sold my apartment without my permission, without my knowledge, and kept all the money. When I confronted the lawyer who had handled the sale, he told me that my mom had assured him that I agreed with the sale, but that I was out of the country, and that's why she was handling everything. She had forged documents, she had lied to lawyers, she had committed literal fraud, and all to keep the money from the sale of my property. I went straight to her house. I didn't even call ahead. I just showed up, knocked on the door, and when she opened, I told her, "Did you sell my apartment?" She looked at me as if she hadn't done anything wrong and told me, "Come in, we need to talk." We went into the living room. Kevin wasn't there, Matthew wasn't either, and she told me with the most serious face in the world, "Yes, I sold it. It was to pay for Matthew's college. It's family money, and I'm your mother. So I have the right to make decisions about those resources." I stood there, staring at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. I told her, "Right? You forged my signature, sold my property that my dad gave me, and you think you have the right?" And she told me, "Your father would have given it to me if he had been fair. That apartment should have been for Matthew from the beginning. You already have a job and can support yourself." The confrontation got more and more intense. I was yelling at her. She was yelling at me. I was telling her that what she had done was a crime, and she was telling me I was being dramatic and selfish. At one point, I told her, "I'm going to the police. I'm going to report you." And she laughed and told me, "Do it? Nobody's going to believe that your own mother would do something like that to you. Besides, technically, my name was on the original papers." But she was wrong. Very wrong. I left that house and went straight to the lawyer I had hired to investigate everything. I told him everything, showed him all the documents that proved the apartment was legally mine, that the sale had been done without my consent, and that there was signature forgery involved. The legal process was long and exhausting. My mom hired her own lawyer, who tried to argue that it had been a misunderstanding, that she genuinely believed she had the right to sell the apartment because her name appeared on old documents. All that bullshit. But the evidence was clear. She had forged my signature on multiple documents, she had lied to the lawyers involved in the sale, and she had taken the money knowing perfectly well it wasn't hers. The case went to trial. I had to testify. She had to testify. It was horrible. But in the end, the court ruled in my favor. They found her guilty of fraud and forgery of documents. The sentence was what impacted me the most. The judge had no mercy. Basically told her that what she had done was betray the most basic trust between mother and daughter, that she had committed a serious crime, and that the consequences were going to be accordingly. He sentenced her to 3 years. In prison. 3 years. When I heard the sentence, I felt a mix of emotions I can't even describe, like relief, sadness, emptiness, all at the same time. My mom cried and screamed in court, looked at me and told me that I had destroyed her, that how could I do this to my own mother, and I just looked at her and felt nothing. There was nothing left to feel. But the thing didn't end there. A few days after the trial, I went to find Kevin. He had been in court, had seen everything, but didn't know the whole story. I found him at his house. Matthew was at college, so we were alone, and I told him, "Kevin, there's something you need to know." I told him about the day I came home early when I was 17, about the guy who was with my mom, about everything that had happened and that I had kept secret for all those years. Kevin turned pale, literally pale, and sat on the couch without saying anything for a long while. Finally, he asked me, "Why didn't you tell me before?" And I told him the truth. I told to him that at that moment I was a scared and confused teenager, that I didn't know what to do, and that afterwards I had simply tried to forget it. Kevin thanked me for telling him the truth, even though it was years late. He told me that many things about his marriage now made sense, behaviors of my mom that he had justified or ignored. 2 weeks later, he called to tell me he had filed for divorce. He told me, "I can't continue with someone who not only cheated on me, but manipulated and stole from her own daughter. She's not the person I thought I had married." Matthew was left in the middle of all this, and I feel really bad for him, honestly. He had nothing to do with my mom's decisions. In fact, she had used his name as an excuse to commit fraud, and that affected him too. I recovered the money from the apartment sale. Well, most of it, because they had already spent part of it on whatever my mom spent it on, but the court ordered that they return everything that was left plus damages. With that money, I bought my own house. A small one, but completely mine, and it's been like starting from zero. Part of me feels like I should feel something more. I don't know. Guilt maybe for having sent my mom to prison? Or sadness for how this whole story ended? But the truth is, the only thing I feel is a kind of empty peace. You know what I mean? Like when a storm ends and everything is left in silence. Matthew has contacted me a couple of times. He wants to have a sibling relationship, and I'm open to that. But it's complicated because inevitably all this is there between us. He's told me he doesn't blame me for reporting our mom, that he understands she was wrong, but I know that somehow he must resent me, or at least feel confused about everything. Kevin also keeps in touch, asks me how I'm doing from time to time, and that's nice, I guess, but also weird because now we have this strange connection through all the bad things my mom did. My mom is serving her sentence now. She has, like, 2 more years left or something. I haven't gone to visit her and I don't plan to. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever really understand what she did, if she'll feel genuine remorse, or if she'll always see herself as the victim of the story. Probably the latter, knowing how she is. And the thing is, I don't need her to understand it. I don't need her to apologize or admit she was wrong, because in the end, none of that would change what happened or how she made me feel during all those years. People ask me sometimes if I miss having a mom, and the honest answer is no, because I never really had one, you know? What I had was a woman who shared my DNA, but who never acted like a mother, who ignored me, used me, betrayed me, and who in the end proved that to her, I was never more than an obstacle or a resource to exploit. And it's okay. It sounds horrible to say it like that, but it's the truth, and I've learned to live with that truth. The apartment my dad gave me represented his love, and his desire for me to have something safe, something mine. And even though my mom tried to take that away from me, in the end she couldn't take away what really mattered, which was knowing that at least one person in my life had loved me unconditionally. I guess if there's something I learned from all this is that family isn't just blood, and that sometimes the best decision you can make is to walk away from toxic people even if they share your last name. I don't regret reporting my mom. I don't regret telling Kevin about the cheating. And I definitely don't regret building a life away from her. The house I bought with the recovered money is my space, my rules, my life, and nobody can take that away from me. Sometimes I feel lonely. I'm not going to lie, but it's a loneliness I prefer 1,000 times to being surrounded by people who hurt me,